All right, everyone, this is Cody Lee of BlackCatBooks.org, author of I, the Dragon, Cruel and Beautiful Rabbit Hole Lore and Frey, and the upcoming Jaw of the Dragon. So I actually finished my first Game Boy game on Nintendo Switch Online. That was Kirby's Dream Land, which coincidentally is probably the shortest and easiest game on there. I can't think of anything else that nothing that I know of that I would call easier. And that makes sense because Kirby's Dream Land was envisioned as like being a very, very beginner friendly, like a game for everyone, right? Like a game that anyone can finish. It has enough complexity and like enough value to it that you can like go through the entire game, even if you're an experienced player. But like if you've never played a video game before, you should be able to see the appeal. And I think that design philosophy actually has led to a really interesting little title. This is the second time I've ever played Kirby's Dream Land. I first played it on the Kirby Dream Land collection on Nintendo Wii, and I didn't think anything of it at the time because I was still like trying to go through like the vast majority of Kirby titles. Because like I didn't play a lot of Kirby games growing up. I had Kirby 64 and that was it. So like over the past decade, I've had to like go through this entire 30-year like lineup of games. Kirby's Dream Land 1, 2. Actually, I had Superstar Ultra, which was great, but I also had Superstar Ultra growing up, by the way, which I actually really do like. But like I had to go back through an entire history, like Howl's 30-year history with the Kirby franchise, which was like Kirby's Dream Land 1, 2, 3. I had to 100% 64 because I never did it as a kid. I played like some of the DS games. I played Squeak Squad. I played like Canvas Curse. I've played like Rainbow Curse eventually. Like there were all these great Kirby games over the years. And I think Dreamland was just kind of lost in the shuffle. Like I think when you're playing a lot of games in like a collection like this, like it's really easy to kind of look at something like Dreamland and kind of overlook it because like there's like better stuff coming. There's more stuff out there. The series gets better essentially. Like I had just come off like my then favorite game in the franchise at that point, Triple Deluxe. So like playing Kirby Dreamland for the first time, it felt underwhelming. It felt simplistic. Like the visuals weren't good. The controls were stiff. There were all these like there weren't even any copy abilities, right? Like it was an extremely primitive, simplistic Game Boy game with like 5 levels, like very little content. And for an initial playthrough, like it's like 30 minutes long. Okay, the entire game can be beaten in 30 minutes. Like it feels like this game might be considered bad, and I almost like I didn't really think of it as bad because I understood its age and like what it was trying to accomplish. But like, I didn't really think about like, the game's virtues and its qualities. But coming back to it after for a second playthrough, I really did start to appreciate it because this is, at its core, the franchise that established one of Nintendo's like core franchises. Well, not necessarily core, but one of Nintendo's like, bigger side things, Kirby, the Forgotten Land, like Kirby, like Forgotten Land was one of my favorite games of 2022, and like it would have been number one if it wasn't for like the the incredible Pokemon Legends Arceus. But Kirby's Dream Land, the first game in the series, it works. Like when you get right down to it, like when you get right down to brass tacks, you have like 4 stages and like a gauntlet stage near the end. And like you have like an interesting character, you have like fun inventive worlds, you have bright cheerful music. I love the Game Boy sounds, by the way. That's been like one of the best things about experiencing Kirby's the Game Boy game, the Game Boy NSO, is that like the sound effects are just top notch. The music for like Metroid 2, for Link's Awakening, for Super Mario Land 2, for this have all been like absolutely stellar. And I cannot wait to see like more obscure games come to the service so I can like experience that like classic 8-bit like Game Boy tunes. Honestly, I feel like Game Boy tunes are super underrated, honestly. I don't think a lot of people really talk about that because everyone knows like the big famous NES ones, but like, I was really surprised at how good the visuals and the sound were for these things because this is technically NES hardware. But like, I suppose if you think about it, the Game Boy was technically limited at the time, and they were just making like all these radical improvements as the years went on, and like we went from like the blocky, really ridiculous like 4-stage nonsense of like the original Super Mario Land to like a more expansive, beautiful, like feeling more like a strange out there Mario game with Super Mario Land 2. So like there are like the Game Boy, I think more than any other Nintendo console, you really do get to see like a lot of really crazy improvements with these games as they go on. And Kirby's Dream Land kind of sticks out in that mind, I think, is that it's a fairly early Game Boy game, 1992, I think was release date, 1991 probably in Japan. But like it looks really, really good. It has like these really charming enemies, great animation. When you beat a stage, like Kirby dances around, like that's been there. So that's been a part of the franchise since the very beginning. You have like, distinguishable characteristics about the world of Kirby. You have like Wispy Woods, you have Kracko, you have like DDD as the final boss. Surprisingly challenging final boss, by the way. You have all these things that are just have just been like, used and reused again for like, 30 years of the franchise. And like it hasn't aged a day. Like Kirby kind of sticks out in my mind as like a Nintendo franchise that never really strayed too far for its roots. And I think Dreamland really is a really good, interesting experience to have if you've like actually played all of those Kirby games. If you actually are a hardcore fan of the franchise and go back to this and like spend like half an hour of your day playing through this gem, you're going to find that like, wow, Kirby from the very beginning was something rather special. Kirby knew exactly what it wanted to be, and it delivered it in spades. Kirby, I think, is a really good example of like how games don't need to be difficult in order to like, have some kind of be compelling and interesting. And I think Dreamland really emphasizes that because you can die, but like you start off right where you left off. It's not really a big deal. But there is still like challenge to it. Like the boss fights take like a little bit of like legit skill. You have to like, learn how the game works. Like Kirby doesn't play like any other video game mascot character that exists. Instead of jumping on enemies, he has to like suck them in and spit them back out. He can swallow them, interestingly, but in this game he doesn't gain powers from it. Which I wonder what the in-lore explanation for that is. He hasn't gotten the ability yet. He hasn't developed it, but whatever. But when you get right down to it, like Kirby's Dream Land is a legit, really, really fun, interesting Game Boy game, and the fact that like I think most people would overlook this if it wasn't on NSO. I think this really speaks volumes about like the value that NSO brings to consumers because I don't think most people would go out of their way to buy and play a game like this if it was on sale on Steam for like $2. But seeing it on there for free, scrolling past it every time you boot up the Game Boy screen, like there are going to be kids who like, get into NSO because of Pokemon and then like, by association, start recognizing these titles, start recognizing Kirby's Dream Land, start recognizing Link's Awakening. You're going to have people going out and buying Link's Awakening Switch because of the popularity of Link's Awakening DX on Game Boy, of Game Boy NSO. You're going to have people like, discovering the weirdness of Super Mario Land 2 and Wario Land 3. Like, you're going to have like people actually playing Kirby's Dream Land and realizing that in spite of like how technically limited it is and how in its age and its like archaic design, that it is still absolutely a classic title in Nintendo's library and is well worth checking out for any real enthusiast of the company.